granniopteryx, she knows the truth, she's linking every link.
Hello. I've been a little bit, down recently, not only because of the terrifying content of the King's speech, the horrifying content of the proposed legislation, which we can only hope will not happen because the Labour Party will be too busy eating itself rather than making laws. But anyway, that's for another video. It's not only because of the terrifying content of the King's speech, but also because of the comments under some of my recent videos talking about the latest political developments. And they run along the lines of, you've lost your country, Britain isn't great anymore. And there's a certain amount of self-satisfaction in that, which I can only assume means that the commenters are American or maybe Australian, mostly American, I think. But you know what? That is no cause for satisfaction. I hope you remember that very common gravestone wording, which is very common in America, especially in New England. As I am now, so you shall be. Just take that as a warning to the USA. Also, an analysis of where we are here in the UK. So anyone listening in the UK, you don't have to switch off. This isn't solely aimed at our transatlantic cousins. What worries me is that the USA is turning into Britain. And now I hear you say, oh, no, it can't happen here. And that's what everyone says. Romans believed that they had a superior culture to everyone else, and they assumed their civilization was going to be a permanent fixture in the world. Tibullus, who was writing during the reign of Augustus, so the height of the Roman Empire, said Rome was the eternal city. And then in the 400s, just after the Visigoths had sacked Rome, a popular poet called Namatianus basically wrote a poem saying things aren't so bad. We're going to bounce back. And for a more modern example, a popular novelist in Germany in the late 1920s, or maybe the very early 1930s. Anyway, he wrote that dictatorship in Germany is impossible because traditional German culture is going to overcome it. I once asked my father, because when I went to school, I learned French. That was the second language. My father learned German as his second language, and I asked him, why German? At the time, it did seem a bit silly to learn German. And my father said, well, that time in the early part of the 20th century, if you didn't know German, you couldn't read any scientific stuff. You couldn't read any philosophical stuff. Germany was where it was all happening. And then it happened in rather the way that nobody anticipated. Of course, it can happen here. It's happening here in the UK, and it could also happen in the USA. And again, if you're in the USA and you think, well, America's far too big, don't worry. It just takes a few elites. Look what's happened to California and Washington State. And I believe there are a couple of other states going the same way. Yeah, Minnesota, remember. Let me just mention some history here. During the 60s and 70s here in Britain, we got taken over by a left ideology that went completely crazy. There was economic chaos. James Callaghan, the Prime Minister, presided over this, and he's been blamed for being weak. Well, to a certain extent he was, but the economic crisis came from the ground up. It came from the unions who were plotting against the government. It came from Soviet influence on the unions, some of which, the heads of which were actually in the pay of the Soviet Union, but some were doing it for ideological purposes. But the country was in absolute financial and social chaos. And then Thatcher came along. And, you know, she acted like a sort of, like a purgative, really. Yeah, and nobody likes a purgative, even if you need one. And especially the BBC and the Guardian and those sort of guys didn't like the purgative of Thatcher because, well, a purgative is especially uncomfortable to someone who has his head up his own, I'll be ladylike about this, his head up inside his own fundament. Okay, so we were on the right path, but the problem is the elites were still there. The universities were still hiring the sort of people they wanted to hire. And, you know, you got a couple of leftist professors, and then when they got onto the appointments board, there were they would appoint other leftist professors. And so the appointments boards got more and more leftist with time, and of course more and more extreme as they chose purer versions of themselves. And the BBC was still pumping out its version of history as well. Now, you know, and this was all going on during the Thatcher era. She really did think she'd finished socialism. I happened to be at a meeting and she was there, and she actually said that she'd finished socialism, and she believed she had, and it looked like she had. Oh, it can't happen here again. And then it crept back. It started a little bit with Tony Blair, and then even the Conservatives got captured by this, because a new tranche of Conservatives were coming up that had been to universities in the 90s. And right now we're going back to the 70s. So why am I addressing this to the USA? Because it's happening to you. Your Callahan years were Biden. The chaos, the lack of direction, the weakness of the Biden years. Then Donald Trump came. He was your Thatcher. He was the purgative. And he was just as popular with the American left, both in the universities and the media, as Thatcher was. And for the same reasons. But the seeds of a post-Trump era are already there, here. They're in place. And of course, in America, it's happening bigger and faster. A bit bigger because it's the USA, and faster because now we have TikTok. Trump was the fight back, but after him, what happens? AOC? Oh, it can't happen here, can it? Well, it couldn't happen here as well. Over here, we had the fight back, but then the blob, not the civil service this time, but the intellectual elite, they came back, and worse, because they'd learnt their lesson about how to deal with it. Remember those medieval tombstones? Hodie mihi, cras tibi, today me, tomorrow you. Just remember that. Is it inevitable? Judging on history, it probably is, but I'm sure that we are all hoping that we can put it off as long as possible. And we can do that, or rather America can do that, only if it recognises what has gone before. Okay, till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.